My name is Jeffrey O.G. Ogbar. I'm a professor of history at the University of Connecticut and founding director of the Center for the Study of Popular Music. My interest in music has been sort of, in many ways, pedestrian, sort of like most people. And a lot of people will ask if I ever played a musical instrument or if I could sing or spit hot fire. Not many people ask me if I can spit bars, but if people ask if I have a sort of musical inclination, if I have any kind of talent, and I do not. My mother was a singer, but I did not play any instrument beyond the sort of fourth grade recorder that we got in school. But in fourth grade, there was a song that came out that year that sort of sounded like no song I had heard before. And there was a cadence to the delivery of the lyrics that was different. And there was a sort of beat that was similar to what I had heard before, but there was a festive joie la vive that was part of this song. And the song was, in some ways, it sort of resonated with me as a child. And it sounds like it might be insulting to say the song appealed to children, but it had a sort of youthful feel to it. And it was, of course, Rapper's Delight. And Rapper's Delight was the first introduction I had to any facet of hip hop. And from that point on, from 9 years old up, rap music had in some way been a sonic backdrop to my life. My first kiss, first time I hit a triple playing baseball, my prom night, all the fun I had in high school and in college, and the best parties in college. And when I hear a certain song, like probably everyone here, you could hear this song from some part of your life and it will immediately evoke memories from that period. You will know where you were, what sorts of fashions you had, what friends you hung out with, places you went, and sometimes the clubs that you danced that song to. And so I, as an intellectual, as a scholar, I had no real formal training in exploring music any more than I did as someone who was an artist. And my first book was on the Black Power movement. I looked at the Black Panther Party and the Nation of Islam and other contours of the Black Power movement. And when I was in graduate school, I trained as a historian. But I did have a professor in undergrad who gave an amazing lecture one day, my freshman year in college, and he talked about how we understand a historical moment and we understand how the music can reflect the social, political, cultural currents of that historical moment. So to understand Miles Davis is to also understand his political and social significance in the early 1950s playing a certain type of music, right? That bebop music in that particular time meant something, and his aesthetic, his style, performing with his back to the audience, the way he dressed, the way he carried himself, all these things are understood in a particular context. In the same way that when Billie Holiday sings Strange Fruit, it means something very different in the 1940s than it does someone singing a cover of that song now, or The Last Poets, or Aretha Franklin, or you go on this list, right? So there was something compelling about that lecture. And when I was in graduate school, I gave a lecture similar to that. And there was a student in the class who said, hey, Jeff, I really enjoyed that lecture. Would you mind refining that and giving that lecture to a Black History Month talk at St. Lawrence University, where I was for 1 year writing my dissertation. And I gave that lecture at this Black History Month talk, and there was a professor who was in the talk. She came to me afterwards and said, Jeff, I really enjoyed that lecture. It was compelling, it was thoughtful. I talked about cultural debates and culture wars, and this guy, Robert H. Bork, who was a Supreme Court nominee, who was promoted by Ronald Reagan but failed, and his critique of pop culture and hip hop in particular. And she said, why don't you consider publishing that, submit it to a journal? And I did, and it was published in the Journal of Black Studies in 1999. It ended up being one of the most cited articles that year and the subsequent years. And a press came to me, University Press of Kansas. They said, hey, that one article that I published, a lot of people read it. I got invited to give talks around the country at different universities. I was a keynote speaker at a conference based on that one article on hip hop. And so people started to know me about this one article, one hit wonder article. But this acquisitions editor asked me would I be interested in writing a book on this, sort of expanding this and writing a book on hip hop. And I was like, why not? And I began writing that book. That was around early 2000s, and the book came out in 2007. And the book Title, there was a dispute about what title. I wanted to use hip hop on both sides, sort of homage to Mos Def's album, Black on Both Sides, but also talked about the contested nature of hip hop and its authenticity. And I went to the press, they didn't like it. They offered something I didn't like. And I went to my students at University of Connecticut. I put a few different titles on the board. I said, let's take a vote and we'll decide what you want. And of the different options on the board, my students here at UConn said Hip Hop Revolution. Submit that to the press, and the book was released, and it's been my one of the most popular books that I've ever published. And it's the hip hop politics, the hip hop revolution, the culture and politics of rap. I explore various facets of hip hop. I look at the antecedents of hip hop, from rock and roll to blues to jazz and minstrelsy, and I go all the way up to the prison industrial complex and the commentary that rappers have often had on the social, political circumstances of their world.